Dad erased me with one sentence. It happened on a quiet Monday morning in early December, the kind of morning where the sky hangs low over Tacoma and everything feels suspended in a dull gray. I remember standing in my small kitchen, heating up leftover soup, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands, glanced down, and felt my chest tighten, even before I finished reading his message. The screen said, "No one needs you to come this Christmas." I did not gasp. I did not feel the floor fall away under my feet. What I felt was something much colder and quieter, like a door clicking shut from the inside. I stared at the message for a moment, letting the words sit there as plainly as he meant them. David did not say, "We think it might be better if you stay in Tacoma this year." He did not say, "Things are tense and we need space." He said, "No one needs you to come this Christmas," as if I were a decoration he decided not to use. My fingers hovered for a moment before I typed back a single word. Cool. I sent it without thinking, without breathing, without caring how he read it. And then, because I knew him, because I knew how he slipped through responsibility like water through a sieve, I added another message before he could respond. "Since you feel that way, you probably will not mind if I finally tell everyone your secret." The second message was sent, and the screen went still. I waited for his reaction, but nothing came. That silence was louder than shouting. It felt like he was telling me again that I did not matter enough to fight with. For those of you listening, I wonder what you are doing right now. Folding laundry, driving, cooking, lying awake in bed. When that message came in, I was just standing in my kitchen with a spoon in my hand, thinking about stopping by my favorite bakery after work. Life really does ambush you in the most ordinary moments. If you are here with me, let me know where you are listening from. When that message arrived, I was watching steam rise off a bowl of soup, completely unaware that my entire December had just been rewritten. After I put my phone down, I walked to the window and looked out at the street, the lines of bare trees and the wet pavement gleaming under the morning light. Dad had not asked if I had plans. He had not asked if I was all right. He had not even acknowledged that the house in Bozeman had been left to me, that I had been planning to visit it before Christmas. He simply told me I was unnecessary, like a line item he was cutting from a budget. For a long moment, I stood there with my hands on the cold windowsill, letting that truth settle into my bones. I knew I should feel heartbroken. I knew a better daughter might cry, or defend herself, or beg to understand why, but I felt something else entirely. I felt a strange calm rising through me, as if a storm I had been outrunning for years had finally passed overhead and left me standing in its quiet center. David had always believed I would do the emotional heavy lifting for our family. He had always assumed I would show up, smooth everything over, help him look like the man he wanted everyone to believe he was. But he had never once imagined I would stop. He never expected me to let go. I walked back to the counter, picked up my phone again, and reread his message. "No one needs you to come this Christmas." He did not even bother to sign his name. The words sat there like a verdict. I had spent my entire childhood and most of my adulthood trying to be the daughter who did not make waves, who understood, who forgave. And here he was, cutting me loose as if all those years were nothing more than a few strings he could snip whenever they became inconvenient. That was what stung the most. Not the sentence itself, but how easy it seemed for him, how routine. Like he had rehearsed it. A few minutes passed before I realized I had been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly, set the phone down, and moved toward my small hallway closet. The suitcase I had pulled out the night before sat there waiting, half-packed. Sweaters, jeans, the Christmas gift I had bought for my sister Claire, a bottle of local wine I knew Mom liked. I stood looking at it for a long moment, trying to feel something other than the cold weight settling behind my ribs. I zipped the suitcase shut, pushed it back into the closet, and shut the door. It felt symbolic, like closing a chapter before it had the chance to begin. I opened my laptop and canceled my flight to Montana. The little box popped up asking me to confirm. I pressed confirm without hesitation and watched the refund process begin. That was that. No explanations. No requests for forgiveness. Dad said no one needed me there, and I believed him. It is a strange thing to discover that you can be removed from your own families, holiday as easily as deleting an email. I thought about all the years I had spent bending myself into shapes that made everyone else more comfortable. I thought about every Christmas I had flown home early just to help clean the house, detect, set up the guest rooms, and prepare the food. I thought about the way Mom always thanked Claire for showing up, even when Claire arrived hours late and contributed nothing more than a smile. I thought about how I had always kept the peace, always bridged the gaps, always made excuses for Dad because he was stressed or tired or carrying too much. It had never once crossed my mind that he might not value any of it. I walked to the sink and poured out the soup that had gone cold. My hands were trembling, but not from sadness. I realized that what I felt was closer to revelation. Dad had given me a gift without meaning to. He had shown me exactly where I stood. I sat down at my dining table and tried to remember a single time Dad had chosen me, not tolerated me, not expected something from me, but actually chose me because he wanted to. I could not think of one. What I could think of was the house in Bozeman, my grandmother's house. The first place in my entire life that had been left to me directly. I had made plans to visit it, to reconnect with the memory of the one person who had loved me without conditions. Instead, Dad had sent me a message that felt like a lock clicking into place, shutting me out before I could step through the door. But I also knew something Dad did not. Secrets sleep lightly, and the secret he hoped I would keep was already stirring under the surface. My phone buzzed with a second message. But it was not from Dad. It was from my workplace calendar, reminding me about a meeting in an hour. The world kept spinning, as if nothing monumental had happened. I grabbed my coat, slipped my phone into my pocket, and stepped outside. The cold Tacoma air hit my face with a sharpness that felt cleansing. I walked to my car with steady steps, telling myself over and over again that if he did not need me, I did not need his permission to stop playing a role in his performance. On the drive to work, I replayed his message in my mind. I tried to attach emotion to it, tried to feel the burning sting I knew should be there. But the longer I thought about it, the more I realized that his rejection was not a wound. It was a mirror. It showed me what had been true for a long time. I had been living on borrowed affection, borrowed tolerance, borrowed peace. He had simply withdrawn the loan. When I reached the parking lot at the office, I turned off the engine and closed my eyes. I could almost hear Grandma's voice in my head, soft and steady, reminding me that some truths hurt because they free us. I had not understood what she meant when she said that years ago, but I understand now. He had cut me off, and in doing so, held space for me. I got out of the car and walked inside, nodding at a coworker in the hallway. The day moved forward as it always did, but I felt different, as if a veil had been lifted. Decisions were easier, movements were clearer. The space inside me where grief should have taken root filled instead with a fierce and quiet resolve. Dad thought he was dismissing me. He had no idea he was releasing me. That night, after work, I returned home and sat in the same kitchen where the morning had started. I placed my phone on the table and looked at it for a long moment. He still had not responded. That was fine. I was not waiting. I opened a blank note and typed a sentence that surprised me by how steady my hands felt. I wrote, "I am done asking to belong." I did not know yet how deep his secret went, or how far his betrayal had stretched, or how much of my life he had maneuvered without my knowledge. But I knew this. The moment he sent that message, he set something in motion that neither of us could reverse. And for the first time in a very long time, I stopped trying to hold on. I let go. The next chapter of my life would not begin in Bozeman, or in a decorated living room, or around a family table. It would begin right here, in a quiet apartment in Tacoma, with the simplest realization I had ever had. He did not need me at Christmas, and I was finally ready to stop needing him. That was the last thought I had before I turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hallway toward my bedroom. The night felt different, still heavy, but with an opening somewhere inside it, a shift, a promise. Something in me had changed, and I could feel the ground moving beneath my feet as if a new path had begun to draw itself forward. I did not know yet that within a few days I would discover more about the truth of the house in Bozeman. I did not know how far he had gone, or the lies he had woven, or the signature he had forged. All I knew was that everything that used to keep me quiet had been ripped away, and in the empty space that followed, something new had taken its place. Something steady, something unafraid. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without waiting for someone to need me. I woke the next morning with the unusual feeling that I had slept through a shift in the world, as if something had quietly rearranged itself inside me while I rested. There was no heaviness in my chest, no dread waiting at the edge of my thoughts. Instead, there was a strange clarity, a sense that the ground beneath my feet was finally visible. I got dressed, made coffee, and sat at my small kitchen table, with the sunlight slipping through the blinds. It was an ordinary morning in every way, except for the quiet certainty that my relationship with Dad had crossed a point of no return. I opened my laptop to deal with a few work emails, but my eyes drifted to another tab I had left open the night before. It was the website for the Gallatin County property records. I had pulled it up half absent-mindedly before bed, thinking I might check the details on Grandma's house, just to remind myself of something that still belonged to me. I clicked on the tab now, sipping my coffee as the site loaded. I typed in the address of the Bozeman house, the one Grandma had left to me in her will. The search results appeared, and for a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. The name listed under current occupancy was not mine. I blinked, leaned closer to the screen, and read it again. A different last name. Not a tenant listing, not a property manager entry. It was a full name with an occupancy start date from almost a year ago. My heart thudded once, hard enough that it startled me. I checked the address again, the parcel number, and the city. Everything matched. I clicked on the occupancy tab, expecting to see some sort of clerical error or note explaining a temporary arrangement. There was simply a line stating that someone else had moved into the property in June of last year. I sat very still for several seconds, my hand wrapped around my coffee mug. The warmth felt distant, muted by the sudden rush of cold running through me. Grandma's house was supposed to be empty. I had not visited it since her funeral, almost 2 years earlier. I had planned to see it this Christmas, maybe spend a night there to feel close to her again. I had pictured walking through her old rooms, smelling the faint trace of peppermint she always kept in glass dishes, opening her cedar chest that still held a quilt she had made for me when I was in high school. I had imagined reconnecting with a version of myself that still felt rooted somewhere. The thought that someone else had been living there without my knowledge felt impossible. It was like realizing that a part of your past had been quietly stolen while you were asleep. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number of an old neighbor of Grandma's. Mrs. Callahan had lived across the street for decades. She was always outside trimming her shrubs or sweeping her porch when I visited Grandma. I knew that if anyone kept track of the house, it would be her, pressing the phone to my ear as I watched the steam rise from my coffee. She answered with her usual warm voice, telling me she was doing fine and asking how life in Tacoma was treating me. I made small talk for a moment before easing into the reason for my call. I asked if she had seen any activity around Grandma's house lately. There was a brief pause, and then she told me that a couple had been living there for quite a while. They came and went regularly. They had even repainted the shutters last fall. I thanked her and hung up, though my hand shook as I lowered the phone. Someone had painted over Grandma's shutters. That detail stung in a way I had not been prepared for. Those shutters had been there since I was a child. I had helped Grandma repaint them once during a summer visit, our hands stained with deep blue for days. The idea that strangers had taken something so small but so personal and changed it without a second thought made my throat tighten. I did not cry. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the office. But once I sat at my desk, the buzzing anxiety under my ribs refused to settle. I opened my phone again and stared at his message from the day before. No one needs you to come this Christmas. I remembered the casual finality of it, the way he had offered no explanation, no space for conversation. Something about that message and the discovery about Grandma's house clicked together in my mind with a soft, undeniable snap. I called Dad. The phone rang several times before he answered. His voice sounded rushed, as if I had interrupted something. I told him that I had heard from Mrs. Callahan that someone was living in the Bozeman house, and I asked him if he knew anything about it. He hesitated. It was not long, maybe a breath or two, but it was long enough to tell me everything. He finally said that he had arranged for someone to stay there temporarily. He called it a rental. He said it was necessary for maintenance, for keeping the place occupied, for preventing the property from falling into disrepair. His tone was clipped, dismissive, as if this should satisfy me and we could move on. I waited for him to offer something else, an apology, a reassurance, even a simple acknowledgement that the house belonged to me. But he did not. Instead, he said he would explain it better later, that he had to go, and then he hung up before I could respond. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen as the call ended. My heartbeat thudded in the side of my neck, not from shock, but from a dawning sense of understanding. He had not been surprised about the occupancy. He had been caught. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath. I knew he could be careless, even selfish, especially when it came to money or responsibility. But this was different. This was not absent-mindedness. This was deliberate. The house was the only thing I had left of Grandma. He knew this. He had been there when she told me she wanted me to have it. He had promised to honor her wishes. And yet someone else had been living there for almost a year. I opened the property records again, this time clicking through every available tab. I took screenshots of each page, saving them into a folder on my desktop labeled Bozeman House. I knew this was not enough to prove anything, but I also knew that every piece of information mattered. Something had happened with that house, something he did not want me to know, and I needed records before anything else disappeared. At my lunch break, I walked to my car and sat inside with the heater running. Snow had begun to fall lightly, coating the parking lot in a soft white layer. I stared at the flakes drifting onto the windshield while replaying his rushed tone, the way he skirted my questions as if they were nothing but small inconveniences. It hit me that he had not once asked how I felt about the house being occupied. He had not asked if I had seen the will recently, or if I remembered Grandma's intentions. He had not asked if I needed anything at all. He had simply shut down the conversation and ended the call. I turned on the ignition, letting the warmth fill the car, and pulled up the contact information for the Gallatin County Clerk's office. I knew property transfers were public record. I knew I could request copies of deeds, occupancy filings, and any official changes tied to the Bozeman house. I called the office and asked what documentation was tied to the address. The clerk told me that if I wanted full copies, I would need to request them through an online form. She asked if I wanted the most recent deed. I said yes. When she read off the file number, something in her tone shifted. It was subtle, but I caught it. She paused, cleared her throat, and told me the document had been filed approximately 18 months earlier. My breath caught. 18 months. That meant the house had changed hands almost immediately after Grandma's funeral. The clerk said the document listed a transfer of ownership, not a rental agreement. I felt heat bloom behind my eyes. Not tears, but the sharp flare of alarm. I asked her who the seller was. She said the name on the seller's line was my father. I sat frozen in my car, listening to the heater hum as her voice echoed in my ear. He had sold the house. He had signed documents. He had arranged everything. He had done it without telling me, without asking me, without any permission. For a moment, rage tried to push its way forward, but it could not find space. The shock was too heavy. I thanked the clerk and ended the call. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I closed my eyes and let the cold truth settle. He had not merely rented out the house. He had given it away. He had taken the last thing Grandma left for me and handed it to someone else. And he had done it with the ease of someone who knew he would never be questioned. I sat there for a long moment before I reached into my bag, pulled out a small notebook, and began writing down every detail I had learned. Dates, names, occupancy listings, deed numbers. I needed a record, something concrete that I could hold in my hand. I knew I did not have the full story yet, but the edges of that story were beginning to show. And they were sharp. The snowfall outside was growing heavier. I turned off the heater and stepped out of the car, letting the cold air hit my face. I did not feel defeated or confused. I felt Awake, fully awake in a way I had not felt in years. He had lied. And if he was capable of lying about this, there was no telling what else he had buried beneath silence. I walked back toward the building, my boots crunching softly against the snow. I was no longer wondering whether something was wrong. I knew it. And for the first time, I was ready to find out just how deep the wrong went. I opened the office door, brushed the snow from my coat, and headed down the hallway with a steadiness that surprised me. Whatever this story was, it was not going to hide from me much longer. I walked down the hallway with that steadiness still in my body, but the moment I sat at my desk again, the reality of what I had learned settled over me like a heavy coat. He had sold the house. That truth echoed in my mind with a weight that felt both unreal and frighteningly clear. I opened my notebook and looked at the dates I had written down, the file numbers, and the clerk's careful repetition of the transfer details. 18 months ago, my dad acted as the seller. A couple has been living there since summer. Every piece pointed to a story I did not yet fully understand, but I knew it was a story built on lies. I opened my laptop again and navigated back to the property records site. The deed summary showed only the basic information, so I clicked deeper, finding a link to the scanned document. My stomach tightened when the digital file opened. It was a standard Montana warranty deed form, but seeing it filled out with my family's information made my pulse quicken. My name appeared in the section titled Former Owner via Bequest. The next line listed the seller. My dad's full name. My breathing caught when I reached the part stating authority granted by the power of attorney. I leaned in, squinting as the scanned signature came into view. It sat there on the screen, my name written in a slanted style I had never used in my life. The lettering was inconsistent, the loops too wide, the angle too sharp. It looked like someone trying to mimic my signature without fully understanding it. I raised my hand to my mouth as the realization hit me. He had not only sold the house, he had forged my signature to do it. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had shifted closer. I sat rigid, staring at the signature. Part of me wanted to believe there was another explanation, but the rational part of my mind pushed back hard. I knew my handwriting. I knew how my hand moved, how my letters formed. This was not my writing. This was someone pretending to be me. I had a memory then, sharp and unexpected. It was of him standing in Grandma's kitchen years ago, the afternoon sun hitting the counter as he flipped through some paperwork. I remembered the way he sighed and said that maintaining a property was more trouble than it was worth, especially one in Montana. He had looked at Grandma with an expression that I now recognized as impatience. He had always seen her house as a burden, not a legacy. I had been too young to understand it then, but I saw it clearly now. He never valued the house. He valued what he could take from it. I printed the deed, the signature, and the full document scan. As the pages slid out of the printer, I felt something inside me shift from disbelief to purpose. I placed each page into a file folder and labeled it Bozeman House Deed. The weight of the folder in my hands made everything feel real. The next logical step was to figure out who handled the sale. I searched the document for the escrow company's information. Northridge Title and Escrow. I found their phone number on their website and called. A woman answered and asked how she could assist me. I told her I needed to confirm the authenticity of a power of attorney used in a property transfer from the previous year. She asked for the file number and then put me on hold. The seconds ticked by slowly. When she returned, her tone was polite but cautious. She told me that the file did exist and that a power of attorney had been submitted, along with the transfer paperwork. She said that from their perspective, the documents had appeared valid at the time. She added that any concerns about forgery would need to be addressed through legal channels. I thanked her for her time and ended the call, but the caution in her voice told me something else. She had seen enough cases to know what forgery looked like. I stood from my desk, needing a moment to breathe. I walked to the break room, filled a paper cup with water, and leaned against the counter. The reality of him forging my signature hit me in waves. He had not made a mistake. He had not misunderstood something. He had taken something that was meant for me and pretended to be me to get rid of it. It was both betrayal and erasure, all wrapped into a single decision. I thought of Grandma then, of her soft laugh, and the way she always tilted her head slightly when she listened to me. I remembered her telling me that the house held the best years of her life, that she imagined me building something of my own there someday. I imagined her writing my name into her will with care, choice me, because she trusted me. The idea that he had taken her gift and discarded it without a conversation made my stomach twist. I tossed the empty cup into the trash and returned to my desk with a steadying breath. If he had gone this far, then I needed someone who understood the law. I searched for real estate attorneys in Tacoma and found a mid-sized firm downtown. One of the partners specialized in property disputes and fraud. His name was Evan Brooks. I read through his bio, noted the cases he had handled, and decided he was exactly the person I needed. I called the firm and explained that I needed to speak with someone about a potential real estate fraud case involving a forged signature. The receptionist told me that Evan had an opening later that afternoon. I booked it immediately. The rest of the workday felt like it moved in slow motion. My thoughts kept returning to the signature, the deed, the 18 months that had passed without my knowledge. How had he been able to look me in the eyes all that time, knowing what he had done? When my shift ended, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. The cold air outside stung my cheeks, but also sharpened my focus. I drove downtown, found a parking spot near the firm, and walked into the building. The waiting room was quiet, furnished with soft chairs and framed artwork of Pacific Northwest landscapes. I handed my name to the receptionist and sat down with the folder of documents in my lap. Evan came out a few minutes later. He shook my hand warmly and led me to his office. He had kind eyes, the kind that made you feel heard before you even started talking. I sat across from him and opened the folder, spreading out the deed, the signature, and the occupancy information. I told him everything I had learned that day, from the property records to his evasive phone call. He listened without interrupting, his eyes scanning each document carefully. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hand. He said that what I had brought him was serious. A forged power of attorney was not a small mistake. It was a felony. He explained that if he had truly signed my name without permission, he had committed fraud. Evan said that the sale could potentially be reversed, but it would require legal intervention, possibly even criminal charges. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread swirl inside me. Rather that someone understood the gravity of what had happened. Dread because I knew that pursuing this meant confronting Dad in a way that would change everything. Forever. Evan told me the next step was to request certified copies of all transactions, documents, including the power of attorney. He said his office could handle that. He also suggested that I avoid contacting Dad directly about the forgery until we had more information. Secrets had already caused enough damage, he said. Evidence would be more powerful than arguments. I nodded, feeling the truth that settled in my chest. I thanked him for his time, gathered my documents, and left the office. The sky had darkened while we talked, and the streetlights cast long reflections across the wet pavement. I stood for a moment outside the building, listening to the distant rush of traffic and the soft patter of drizzle beginning to fall. Walking toward my car, I felt the weight of the day pressing on me, but under it was something else. Determination. Dad had taken something precious from me, and he had hidden it behind forged papers and silence. What he did not seem to understand was that I was not the kind of person who let silence bury the truth. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, my hands steady on the wheel. As I drove home, the city lights blinked past my windows like markers on a road I could not turn away from. Dad had made a choice 18 months ago. Now I am making mine. I walked into my apartment, hung my coat, and set the folder down on the kitchen table. I traced my finger over the printed signature, the crooked loops and uneven slants. It was the shape of Dad's betrayal, and it was the beginning of my proof. I turned off the lights and headed to my bedroom, knowing that the path ahead would be long, complicated, and painful. But I also knew there was no turning back now. The truth was already in motion, and I intended to follow it wherever it led. I turned off the lights and headed to my bedroom, knowing that the path ahead would be long, complicated, and painful. But I also knew there was no turning back now. The truth was already in motion, and I intended to follow it wherever it led. That thought stayed with me when I woke the next morning, the winter sun still low and cold outside my window. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened the folder again. The forged signature looked even more offensive in daylight. I pulled my laptop closer and began searching for financial records connected to Dad. I had no legal access to any of his accounts, but Evan had told me that public filings, liens, and bankruptcy documents were searchable. It was a place to start. It surprised me how quickly I found something. He had a recorded lien filed against him roughly 2 years earlier, something to do with a gambling debt in Spokane. I clicked through the details, reading each line carefully. The balance owed at the time of filing was more than $400,000. My breath caught. That number sat uncomfortably close to what Evans suspected had been taken from the sale of Grandma's house. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling my stomach twist. Another search brought up a civil case involving a private lender. More debt, more overdue balances, more signs of a man sinking deeper than anyone in our family ever knew. I wondered how long he had been hiding it. I wondered how many lies he had told to keep this secret upright. I opened a new tab and searched for vehicle purchase records, not expecting much. But when I typed in Claire's full name and the state of Washington, something appeared. A vehicle registration dated around the same time the house was sold. A luxury crossover that I knew she had been driving proudly for the last year and a half. I had asked her once how she managed to afford it, since she had been working part-time at a counseling center. She told me Dad helped her, and I believed her because I wanted to. Now, seeing the paperwork on my screen, I felt a sharp ache in my chest. The down payment amount matched another portion of what Evan estimated had gone missing. It struck me then how he must have rationalized it. Claire needed help. Claire had always been the fragile one. Claire needed guidance, support, and protection. I remembered countless moments when he defended her, saying she was too sensitive to handle hardship. He would say she had a good heart, but the world was too harsh for her. He never said anything like that about me. For me, it was always that I was strong enough to handle things alone. He said it like it was a compliment, but it always felt like a wall between us. I clicked through more records, and I found smaller transactions tied to credit card statements I recognized from the year before. They were not in Dad's name, but connected to a woman I vaguely remembered meeting once at a restaurant. He had introduced her as a friend. I had shaken her hand politely, even though the moment felt odd. Now, I know better. She had been more than a friend, and part of Grandma's house money had gone into expensive gifts for her. Jewelry stores, high-end boutiques, a getaway package to Palm Springs. There was a line item that made my throat tighten. A luxury spa weekend for 2. The date matched the week he told me he was going fishing with friends. I sat there staring at the summary of what I had uncovered. Money for gambling debts. Money for Claire's car. Money for gifts for a woman who was not my mom. The pieces formed a clear picture, and each part of it cut a little deeper. I pushed my chair back and stood up, pacing the length of the kitchen. I felt a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. It felt personal, but it also felt strangely calculated, as if he had sorted his children into categories and decided who deserved sacrifice and who deserved safety. Claire was delicate. I was durable. Claire needed saving. I could be set aside. I remembered a moment from childhood, a memory that floated up with clarity. The registration fee was too high, Dad said, and he told me we needed to save money for things that really mattered. A week later, he bought Claire a pair of designer boots because she had cried in the store. I remembered watching the whole exchange, feeling confused and small. When I asked why she got them, he laughed softly and said that she had a tender heart, and sometimes you had to protect tender hearts. He never said what you had to do with strong ones. I learned over the years. Strong ones got overlooked. Strong ones carried the weight. I stopped pacing and sat down again at the table. The contrast between us felt sharper now. Claire had always been treated as if she needed the world padded around her. I had been treated like I could weather anything. But even strong people break when someone they trust carves away at the life they were meant to have. I opened an email draft and began typing everything I had found, attaching each document as evidence. I wrote out the gambling lien, the vehicle registration, the luxury expenses tied to the woman he had been seeing. It felt painfully methodical, but necessary. Evan needed the information, and I needed to face this without looking away. When the email was ready, I read it twice, feeling my throat tighten as I processed each line. Then I clicked send. The whoosh of the email leaving my outbox felt like the closing of a door behind me. It was official now. I had not just found evidence, I had acted on it. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Claire. Her name lit up the screen with the same floral background I had chosen years ago. I hesitated, wondering if I could handle her voice right now. But I answered. She asked why I had not called Mom back the night before. She said Mom was worried. She said Dad seemed distracted, like something was wrong. I listened quietly, letting her speak. Then she asked if I was coming home for Christmas, or if the argument with Dad had been worse than I let on. I felt an ache in my chest hearing her voice, soft and familiar and unaware of everything beneath the surface. I told her I was taking time for myself. She asked if she had done something wrong. The question landed with a heaviness I did not expect. I told her she had not, at least not directly, and she exhaled with relief. She said she hoped I would come home because Christmas was not the same without me. After we hung up, I sat there for several long minutes, staring at nothing. It would be easier to blame her fully, but the truth was more complicated. Claire had not forged my signature. Claire had not sold the house. Claire had not emptied the funds into debt payments and gifts. She had just been the chosen one, the one Dad protected, the one he poured himself into, for reasons he had never explained fully. The reasons, I suspected, went deeper than anyone knew. I thought back to something Mom had once said when I was 13. She mentioned that Claire had struggled when she was young, that she needed more attention, more reassurance. She said Dad always felt guilty about something that happened in those early years. I had not understood it then, and Mom had not elaborated. But now that memory echoed with a new kind of weight. Was guilt the reason he sacrificed me? Did he think he owed her something so big that everything else became negotiable? I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, trying to steady my thoughts. I could not untangle the past, but I could control what came next. He had made choices that crossed legal lines. He had sacrificed my inheritance to cover debts and maintain relationships built on secrecy. Whether he did it out of desperation, guilt, or favoritism, did not erase the consequences. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The holiday lights on the neighboring houses glowed softly, a reminder of the season I had once loved. The heaviness in my chest sharpened into something steadier. I realized that I had moved from suspicion into certainty. This was no longer a misunderstanding or a mistake. It was deliberate. It was theft. It was betrayal. The realization settled in my bones, clear and cold. There was no going back. I turned away from the window and looked at the table where the folder still lay, open. The evidence was there. The truth was there, and now I was ready to pursue it fully. I walked over, closed the folder with a firm hand, and felt a sense of resolve settle over me. I would continue the investigation. I would allow Evan to move forward with legal action. I would no longer protect him from the consequences of his choices. The line between doubt and certainty had vanished. There was only truth now, and I was prepared to follow it all the way. I turned off the kitchen light, letting the room fall into shadow. The path ahead might be long, but I knew exactly where I stood. The next morning came with a thin layer of frost outside my window and a tightness. In my chest, I could not quite shake. I brushed my teeth, made coffee, and tried to pretend it was any other day. It was not. I had crossed a line internally, even if no one else knew it yet. I opened my email and saw a message from Evan saying he had already requested certified records through formal channels. He expected them within a few business days. When they arrived, he said, we would have everything needed to push forward. I stared at his email longer than necessary. Knowing the truth and being able to prove the truth were two different things. Now I have both. Just as I set my phone down, it buzzed again. It was Mom. The name alone drained something from me. I answered because not answering would only lead to more calls, more questions, more pressure. She started with a gentle tone, like she was easing into a conversation she dreaded. She said Dad had been quiet. She said he was worried about me. She said she sensed something was wrong and wanted to hear it from me directly. I listened, letting her words land one by one. Not a mention of the house. Not a mention of anything real. It was her usual way of demanding the truth while avoiding the truth she already feared. I took a breath and told her I had gone to see the property records for the Bozeman house. I told her what I found. I kept my voice calm, steady, almost detached. She inhaled sharply. Then she exhaled, as if she had expected this call eventually and had rehearsed lines. She asked why I was digging into something that only caused stress. She said I knew how overwhelmed Dad had been these past years. She said life forced people to make difficult choices. I felt my jaw tighten. I asked her when she had learned the house was sold. There was a brief pause, only a heartbeat, but enough to confirm she knew more than she admitted. She finally said she found out after it happened and chose not to burden me with it. She said she figured I did not need a house in Montana anyway. Her words hit me in a place I did not expect. I did not need it. As if need were the measure. As if something being mine mattered less than whether she believed I deserved it. I repeated the words in my head while she continued speaking. You do not need that house. You already have your life in Tacoma. Why cling to something so far away? Why let it upset you? I shut my eyes and realized she was not trying to comfort me. She was rewriting the story so that my loss did not matter. She needed me to accept a scaled-down version of events so she would not have to face her own involvement. I told her calmly that the house was mine. That Grandma left it to me intentionally. That someone forged my signature and sold it behind my back. I told her that what I needed was not the house itself, but the truth acknowledged. She sighed again with that soft disappointment that always made me feel like the unreasonable one. She said families sometimes do things for the greater good. She said I had always been the strong one. She said Claire was too fragile to handle the kind of financial strain the family was under when everything happened. Her tone made it sound like Dad selling the house was noble because it protected Claire. For a moment, I could not speak. It was the same story they had told for years, but this time it had teeth. I finally said I did not understand why protecting Claire meant sacrificing me. Mom said I was interpreting it wrong. She said I had my own life. I had my job. I had my independence. I never relied on them in the same way Claire did. It was strange hearing her say it out loud. This ranking system of worthiness I had always sensed, but never had confirmed. Mom kept explaining that Claire needed support, love, reassurance, stability, as if I did not. As if I had somehow been born without those needs. I told her gently but firmly that love is not supposed to be rationed. She said I was being dramatic. Something inside me went quiet. Not angry, just quiet. The way a person becomes when they finally hear the truth they have been bracing against their whole life. She asked if I planned to ruin Christmas. Her voice sharpened as she said it. She asked if I intended to punish Dad for something he did under pressure. She asked if I was really willing to tear the family apart over a house I did not even live in. I could almost see her shaking her head as she spoke. I could almost see the disappointment settling in her eyes. I told her I did not tear anything apart. I was simply no longer willing to carry the weight of secrets they had built. She grew frustrated then. She said I was letting resentment cloud my judgment. She said Dad only ever wanted what was best for us. She said I was reading too much into something that had already been dealt with. I asked her who dealt with it. She did not answer. When she finally said my name, it was softer, but not kinder. She said I needed to let go of old wounds. She said this was not about me in the way I thought. She said I had to understand the sacrifice Dad made for the family. Sacrifice. The word lingered in the air long after she finished speaking. She acted like I had been given something instead of robbed. I told her I needed space and ended the call before my voice could break. I sat at the table for a while, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. The silence around me felt thick. Her words replayed again and again. You do not need that house. You are strong enough to move on. Claire needs more support than you. Families make sacrifices. Dad did what he had to do. All of it twisted into a single, ugly truth. In their eyes, I was the child who could be forfeited. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Claire. Her messages came in rapid, short bursts, asking if Mom had called me, asking if everything was okay. asking if she had done something wrong. I did not want to be pulled into an emotional tangle, but I also did not want her spiraling over something she did not create. I replied that I was dealing with something serious and that it had nothing to do with her. She sent back a relieved thank you, followed by a hesitant question. She asked whether I was upset about the house. She added that Dad told her he never thought I would want it anyway. The words landed with the same sting as Mom's. They had built a narrative about me without my participation. They had decided my needs for me. They had convinced themselves I did not value what they took. I asked her if she knew the house had been sold. She replied that she found out after the fact, but did not understand the details. She said Dad told her it had become too much for the family to handle. She asked if that was wrong. I typed and erased several responses before settling on the simplest truth. Yes, it was wrong. But I told her I was not mad at her. I told her the situation was complicated, but I needed time. She said she understood, though I doubted she fully did. It was not maliciousness on her part. It was simply the way our family had conditioned her to see the world. That delicate heart they always said she had came at the cost of mine. I put my phone down and looked at the folder again. Every document inside represented not just theft, but erasure. They had not only taken something from me, they had rewritten the story so thoroughly that they believed I never wanted it in the first place. I stood and walked to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. The chill cleared my thoughts. I dried my hands and returned to the table. My anger had shifted into something steadier, something sharper. This was no longer about property. This was about being pushed out of my own family narrative. This was about being told repeatedly that my needs did not matter because I was strong enough to survive without them. I opened my laptop again and drafted another message to Evan. I told him everything Mom had said. I wrote down her insistence that I did not need the house. I wrote down her admission that she knew it had been sold. I wrote down her explanation that Dad sacrificed the house to protect Claire. I ended the email by saying plainly that I was ready to move forward with whatever legal action was necessary. When I clicked send, I felt a sense of clarity I had not felt in days. A few hours later, Eva replied, saying the combination of forged documents and family admission created a solid foundation for obtaining investigative warrants. He said once the certified deed records arrived, he could proceed formally. He said we were no longer in a gray area. We had enough evidence to move. I stared at his message, feeling the words settle into my chest. Solid foundation. Enough evidence. No longer a gray area. The truth had been gathered piece by piece, and now it was undeniable. I stood up from the table, turned off the lamp, and let the room fall quiet again. I felt a shift inside me, subtle but unmistakable. I had stopped wondering whether I was overreacting. I had stopped questioning whether I misunderstood. I had moved fully, completely, into certainty. And certainty had a way of changing everything. That feeling followed me into the next week, steady and cold beneath my ribs. I went to work, answered emails, fixed software issues, sat in meetings, but a part of my mind was always elsewhere. It was focused on the folder sitting on my kitchen table, the one that held the truth about what Dad had done. Every day that passed brought more updates from Evan. Each step was quiet, but carried weight. Requests submitted. Confirmations received. Additional documents expected. I lived in two worlds at once. The ordinary one everyone could see, and the one beneath it, where the walls were shifting. One afternoon, while I was typing up a report, my phone lit up with a message in the family group chat. David had sent a photo of the living room back home. The tree was already up, decorated with ornaments I recognized from childhood. The room was set the way my mom liked it, with matching throw pillows and fresh garland draped along the mantel. Beneath the photo, he wrote a message about how excited he was for our Christmas gathering, how he could not wait to have everyone home under one roof. Then he added that the party this year would be extra special, because it would be. The first time in years the whole family would be together. The words hit hard. The whole family. I read it twice, then again, letting the meaning sink in. I was not part of that picture. I was not in that message. He was planning a full celebration while acting like I did not exist. He was rewriting the story publicly, the same way he had done privately with the house. Another photo came through. This time it was Claire with Mom, both standing in the kitchen holding a tray of cookies. They looked cheerful, dressed in soft winter sweaters, framed by warm light. Mom's caption said they were getting everything ready for the big night. Claire added a message saying she could not wait to see everyone. Neither of them addressed the fact that I had already said I was not coming. Neither asked why. It was like they had carved out a version of Christmas where my absence was assumed and acceptable. I turned my phone face down on the desk and stared at the screen in front of me, without seeing any of the words. The ache that rose inside me was not new, but it was sharper this time. They were preparing a celebration, built on the lie that nothing was wrong. They were decorating a house paid for with the remains of another house they stole from me. And they were able to do it because they had practiced this kind of silence for years. That evening after work, I drove home through cold air that held a hint of snow. When I stepped into my apartment, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I set my things down and opened the folder on the table, running my fingers along the edge of the papers. They were more than documents now. They were a map of choices he had made. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from him directly. He wrote that he hoped I was doing okay, and that he wished I would decide to come home for Christmas. Then he added something that made my breath stop. He said it would be a shame to make things awkward at the party with unnecessary tension. He said it was best for everyone if we kept things positive for the holidays. Unnecessary tension. The words felt like a shove. He wanted silence, not peace. He wanted me to stay quiet so his image would stay intact. I read the message several times, feeling something inside me slowly settle. It was not cold. It was recognition. He was not trying to mend anything. He was trying to keep the truth contained. I did not respond. I wrote an email to Evan, updating him on the message and the family's planned Christmas party. I explained how the situation had escalated emotionally, and that I wanted to understand how the legal steps would unfold if we chose to act, before or during the gathering. He replied within an hour, saying that once the certified documents arrived, a formal request for a warrant could be filed within a short window. Interviews, seizures, and arrests were not predictable, but the timeline could align with the holiday, depending on when the judge reviewed the case. He added something at the end. He asked whether I was prepared for the personal fallout. He said legal justice rarely came without emotional cost. I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair, letting his words drift through my thoughts. Was I prepared? I was not sure, but I also knew I could not stop now. Silence had become part of the problem. If I stayed quiet, I would be cooperating in my own erasure. A few days later, I was in a grocery store picking up essentials when my phone rang. It was Claire. I answered quietly, leaning against the cart. She said she had been thinking about me and asked if I would change my mind about Christmas. She said Dad had been planning the event for months and that he really wanted it to feel like a family reunion. She said Mom had even invited some relatives from Portland. Then her voice softened. She asked if things were really that bad between Dad and me. I did not know how to answer. She was my sister, but she had not seen the documents. She had not seen the forged signature, or the gambling debts, or the money trail. She was speaking from a place of hope, not knowledge. I told her there were things she did not understand yet, things I was dealing with carefully. She hesitated, and then said something that stayed with me long after the call ended. She said Dad had mentioned that I was going through a difficult phase and that I needed space. He told her I had a tendency to get overwhelmed and misinterpret things. He said it was best to let me settle down on my own. The air around me felt suddenly thinner. Misinterpretation, space, overwhelmed. He had taken the truth and flipped it into a story where he was the reasonable one, and I was fragile. A story where he had done nothing wrong, and I had imagined the problem. It was the same pattern Mom used, the same pattern the family leaned on whenever things became uncomfortable. I told Claire I loved her and ended the call. Then I stood in the middle of the store aisle, my hands gripping the cart, letting the weight of everything press into me. I could feel the shape of the plan forming. I could feel the moment approaching when silence would no longer be an option. 2 days before Christmas, the certified documents arrived. I received an email from Evan saying the records were complete. Attached were scanned copies of the original power of attorney submitted with the sale along with the closing documents and signatures. He said the discrepancies were obvious. The signature style did not match my state identification, my prior property filings, or any legal documents in my history. He said the financial path of the sale raised immediate red flags. He told me he would be filing the formal request first thing in the morning. I printed everything and laid the documents out across my dining table. It felt surreal seeing the fraudulent signature highlighted in bright ink. There was no way to soften it. This was a deliberate act. This was theft. This was a fraud. This was a parent holding a pen and writing away their child's future. That night, I sat on my couch with the lights dimmed and stared at my small artificial tree in the corner. I thought about Grandma's real tree in Montana, the one she decorated every year with ornaments she had collected over decades. I thought about how she used to say that the house would always belong to someone who appreciated its history. She never imagined it would be emptied and sold without a word. My phone buzzed again. A new photo from the family group chat. The house. Dad had written that everything was ready for the big celebration. He added that it would be a perfect night for memories, laughter, and family unity. I stared at the photo for a long time before turning my phone upside down. Later, while the sky outside grew darker and the wind rattled the windows, I received another message from Evan. He said the judge had reviewed the preliminary filings and was expected to sign them. Warrant. I read his message slowly, letting each word settle. Then I looked around my apartment at the quiet shelves and soft lamplight and felt something shift again. This time it was not sadness or disbelief. It was resolved. I texted Evan back, telling him he had my full cooperation. I told him I understood the gravity of what was coming. I told him I was ready. When I set my phone down, the silence in the room felt different. It was no longer a void. It was a plan. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the faint glow of holiday lights flicker across the street. Dad had built a celebration around an illusion. He had filled a room with family to distract from what he destroyed. He had erased me from the picture to protect his secret. He thought silence would keep him safe. But I was done being silent. I turned away from the window and exhaled slowly, knowing that once the next step was taken, nothing in my family would ever be the same. For the first time, that truth did not scare me. It clarified everything. Christmas Eve arrived with a cold stillness in the air, the kind that made the world feel suspended. I woke to a pale gray sky and the distant sound of someone scraping ice off a windshield. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the quiet, letting the reality of the day settle around me. My family was preparing for a celebration without me, and tonight, everything would shift. I made coffee and wrapped my hands around the warm mug. My apartment was simple and undecorated, except for the small tree in the corner, with a few white lights. I had not felt much like celebrating this year. I stood by the window and watched the light snow fall. My mind drifted to the house back home, filled with people, noise, and polished surfaces. He loved Christmas for the performance of it. He loved being the host, the head of the table, the man who appeared steady even when everything beneath him was cracking. My phone vibrated on the counter. A text from Claire. She wrote that she hoped I changed my mind and that everyone missed me already. She sent a photo of the living room. The tree glowed in gold. The fireplace crackled. Mom stood in the corner, arranging poinsettias, and Dad was opening a bottle of wine with a proud smile. It was a picture that would have warmed me in another life. Now it only felt distant, carefully staged, designed to be admired. I stared at the photo, noticing details. The expensive garland Dad ordered last year. The heavy wood dining table Mom insisted on polishing every day in December. The couches were arranged just so. Everything looked perfect on the surface. Everything looked normal. No one in that room knew what was coming. I typed a short message to Claire saying I loved her and hoped she had a nice evening. I did not explain anything beyond that. Silence was still my strategy. I set the phone down again. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I tidied the apartment, folded laundry, and tried to busy myself with small tasks. But underneath every movement was an awareness that tonight would be a turning point. I had not felt that kind of tension since the day Grandma died, the day I understood what it meant to lose someone irreplaceable. Around midday, Mom called. I hesitated before answering, but finally lifted the phone to my ear. She asked how I was doing, and whether I planned to surprise everyone by showing up. After all, she said Dad had been mentioning my name all morning, acting like he was sure I would walk through the door at the last minute. She said it would mean so much to the family. Her words were soft, practiced, designed to tug at something in me. But I am past that now. I told her calmly that I would not be attending. There was a pause long enough for me to picture her disappointed expression. Then she said she hoped I would reconsider, and that Christmas was not the time for grudges. She said families have disagreements, but should still be together. I listened without responding, letting her fill the silence with her version of events. She said she believed in forgiveness. She said I was always too sensitive when things got tense. She said people make mistakes, and we should move forward. I finally told her I was taking care of something important and that I needed this Christmas to be quiet. She tried to ask what that meant, but I ended the call gently. I could not give her space to twist the truth into something that benefited everyone but me. As the afternoon approached, I imagined the party taking shape. Dad in a crisp shirt, greeting guests at the door with a booming laugh, Mom arranging dishes in the kitchen, straightening table runners, fussing over the smallest details. Claire helps guests find seats, offering warm hugs and soft smiles. Relative from Portland arriving with gifts, music playing, the smell of roasting meat filling the house, a version of Christmas that had been rehearsed for decades. And I was here, in my apartment, with a microwave dinner, a dim lamp, and a stack of legal documents. The contrast should have hurt, but somehow it did not. It felt honest. It felt like the first Christmas where I was not pretending. Around 5 p.m, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and turned on a movie I had seen many times. I let the familiar soundtrack fill the room while my thoughts drifted. Snowflakes drifted outside my window, catching the glow from the streetlight. I remembered childhood Christmases when Grandma would read stories by the fire and whisper to me that I had a quiet kind of strength. She said that people with quiet strength often carried more than most realized. I never understood what she meant until now. Just after 6, my phone rang. It was Evan. I sat up, my heart thudding. I answered quickly, trying to keep my voice steady. He wished me a good evening and then got straight to the point. The judge had signed the warrant. The next step would be carried out within hours. He explained a few logistics, his tone measured and clear. He asked me again if I understood what this meant. I told him I did. He said the authorities would not notify Dad beforehand. They would arrive during the evening, once the officers coordinated arrival time and location. He said the team was already briefed and prepared to act. He told me I did not need to be anywhere near the house unless I wanted to be. My throat tightened. I thanked him, listening to the calm steadiness in his voice. He reminded me that this was not revenge. This was legal action, based on evidence. He told me again to be prepared emotionally. He said it would be hard even if it was right. I nodded, even though he could not see me. When the call ended, I sat still for a long moment, the phone heavy in my hand. The warrant had been signed. The plan was no longer theoretical. Tonight, my dad would answer for what he had done. I stood and walked to the window again. The snowfall had thickened, covering the street in a soft white layer. Kids were pulling sleds down the hill near the corner. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The world outside seemed calm, unaware that my childhood home was only hours away from being shattered open. My phone buzzed again. More photos from Claire. She sent one of Dad giving a toast, his glass raised, his smile wide. Mom sat beside him, looking proud. The caption said the night was perfect, but it would be even better if I were there. I stared at the photo and felt something inside me shift. It was not sadness. It was recognition of how deeply they wanted the illusion to hold. I put my phone face down and returned to the couch, pulled a blanket over my lap. The movie continued the storyline, something I did not need to follow closely. The warmth of the blanket and the soft light from the lamp made the room feel like a cocoon. I listened to the wind picking up outside, whistling faintly through the cracks in the window frame. Time passed slowly. I heated my dinner, ate quietly, washed the dish, and returned to the couch. My mind wandered through memories of the house in Bozeman, its worn wooden floors and the pine trees that surrounded it. I thought of Grandma's voice telling me someday I would understand the importance of having something that was mine alone. I wondered if she had known how difficult that would be. A text came in from a cousin wishing me Merry Christmas. She asked if I was okay and said she noticed I was not at the party. She wrote that Dad seemed tense but was pretending everything was fine. I did not respond. I was not ready for anyone's concern or questions. Not yet. The hours felt like they stretched, but they also carried momentum. Every minute brought me closer to the moment when the truth would meet the light. Just after 9, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Evan. He wrote that the action was underway. I inhaled deeply and set the phone on the table beside me. I did not pick it back up. I did not open the next message that buzzed in shortly after. I did not need to. I knew what was happening. Dad was still smiling in the photos an hour ago. Dad was still raising glasses and telling stories. Adam was still hosting his perfect Christmas. Everything he built stood on a foundation of silence, and that silence had finally cracked. I leaned back against the couch cushions and closed my eyes, letting the moment settle over me. Whatever came next would unfold without me needing to lift another finger. I had already done my part. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my chest, light and startling. I reached over, turned off the movie, and sat in the quiet. I placed my phone screen down and let it rest. For several long minutes, I did not move. My apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and the faint whistle of wind against the window. The stillness felt unreal, like the world had paused and was waiting for something. Maybe I was waiting too, waiting for a shift I would not witness firsthand, but would feel nonetheless. I pulled the blanket tighter around me and let my head fall back against the couch. Time passed strangely. I could sense the moments moving but could not measure them. My thoughts drifted between memories of Grandma's house, the smell of pine and wood smoke, and the images of Dad smiling in the photos from earlier that evening. Somewhere between those drifting memories, I felt the smallest tremor in my chest. It was not fear, it was anticipation. Somewhere across the city, somewhere warm and brightly lit, a door was about to open. A life built on control and secrecy was about to collapse, and I was here, in the dim light of my apartment, listening to the silence that always comes right before something changes. I shifted on the couch, stood up, and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. My hands felt steady as I filled the cup, steady enough that I knew I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer second-guessing anything. I was no longer wondering if I had gone too far. I sipped the water and listened to the faint echoes of my neighbors celebrating their own holidays. Laughter floated through the walls in muffled bursts. It sounded distant, unreal, like it belonged to a different world. I had just set my cup down when my phone buzzed once on the table. Not the sharp buzz of a call, just a message. I did not reach for it. I stood there in the half-light of my kitchen, letting the moment settle. Another buzz came, then a third. I exhaled slowly and finally picked up the phone. The first message was from a cousin. Everything is okay there. The next was from another relative asking where I was. Then came a third message from Claire, but I did not open it. Not yet. I set the phone in my palm and walked back to the couch. The messages kept coming, lighting up the screen in a soft glow against the blanket. Then my phone vibrated differently. A voice message, and another, then a missed call. Something had shifted. I tapped the screen reluctantly and opened Claire's message first. It was short. Lena, something is happening. My breath caught. Then a message from my aunt appeared. Are you with your parents? And then a voice note from Claire. I pressed play slowly, holding the phone near my ear. I heard noise in the background. Loud voices. Someone was gasping. Footsteps. Then Claire's voice, small and trembling. They are here. Police are here. David is arguing. Everything stopped. Lena, what did you do? My stomach tightened as I closed the message, but I did not answer her. I did not call back. I sat with the phone in my hand, hearing echoes of noise through the speakers, even though the message had ended. I imagined the scene unfolding in the house I knew so well. The polished floors, the bright lights, the carefully arranged decorations. and the sudden knock that would have stopped every conversation. I could see it so clearly. Dad, standing at the center of the living room, glass in hand, mid-sentence, unaware he had reached the end of something. The music was still playing faintly until the knock came again, louder this time, conversations freezing, laughter cutting off, faces turning toward the front door. Someone probably said it must be a neighbor or someone late to the party. Someone probably opened the door with a smile still on their face, and then they saw the officers. My phone buzzed again. A message from a family friend. Call me right now. Another from a cousin. Is it true? I swallowed hard and opened Claire's next message. He is yelling at them. They told him they have a warrant. Mom is standing next to him, but she is not saying anything. Why is she not saying anything? I stared at the words, feeling the smallest crack open inside me. Mom. Silent. For the first time in my life, I could almost see her standing still, not protecting him, not smoothing anything over. Maybe she had known a part of this. Maybe she had known more than she let on. But seeing it exposed in front of everyone was different. It stripped away all the comfortable excuses. I closed the message and let my eyes fall shut. Another buzz. I opened it slowly. It was from a neighbor who had been at the party earlier. The cops are taking him out in front of everyone. I imagined the moment. Dawes stepped outside, coat barely on, the winter air hitting his face as guests looked on from the doorway. People whisper. Someone is crying, someone covering their mouth. The lights from the patrol car flashing across the snow-covered driveway. Dad tried to keep control of the situation even then, insisting there was a misunderstanding, reaching for pride that had nowhere left to stand. My hands shook slightly as I lowered the phone. Another message came, this time from Claire again. Tell me it is not true. Tell me you did not turn him in. The words hit me harder than I expected, not because she accused me, but because she still believed he had done nothing wrong until the moment she saw him being escorted out. I typed a reply, then erased it, then typed again. I wrote that I had done what I needed to do, because what he did was illegal and it was mine he took. I told her I was sorry she had to see it that way. I told her she deserved better than lies too. I hesitated before sending it. Then I tapped send. The next message came quickly. He said he sold the house to protect us. Did he lie? I felt something inside me break, then reassemble in a new shape. I wrote back. He lied. I put the phone down again. My apartment felt colder, quieter. A long moment passed before another notification popped up. This time it was from Mom. It was one sentence. Call me now. I closed my eyes and let the phone sit untouched. In the quiet of my apartment, I imagined the scene continuing without me. David was led down the walkway while the party guests stood in stunned silence. The music turned off. The food is growing cold. The perfect night collapsing in real time. Mom watched everything she had tried to protect unravel, and Claire slowly realizes that the car she loved so much had been bought with money stolen from her sister. I pictured Dad's girlfriend somewhere in the room, wide-eyed, step quietly toward the door, slipping out in the chaos, leaving before she could be associated with the fallout. I pictured Mom's face, pale and still, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She would not defend him now. Not when the truth was laid out so publicly she could not pretend it was something else. I pictured Claire crying, not because she lost a gift, but because she finally understood the cost of it. I sat down on the couch again and wrapped the blanket around my shoulders. My breathing slowed until it matched the rhythm of the heater clicking softly in. The background. My phone buzzed again, with Mom's name lighting up the screen, but I did not reach for it. The sound faded into the stillness around me. I knew I would call her. Just not yet. I needed one more moment in the quiet before the storm reached my door. It did not take long. My phone lit up again, but this time Mom left a voicemail instead of calling. Her voice trembled in the recording. She said she needed to talk. She said she did not understand how things had gotten this far. She said she did not know it was this bad. I listened once, then again, trying to hear something genuine beneath the fear and confusion. There was something in her tone I had not heard in years. Not disappointment, not superiority, something closer to loss. I waited a few minutes before calling her back. She answered on the first ring, her breath uneven. The noise behind her sounded quiet, like she had stepped outside. She told me people had gone home. She said the house felt hollow. She said Dad had been taken away and she had not followed the officers to the RIC station because she did not know what she could do there. I asked her if she was all right. She hesitated like she did not know the answer herself. Then she said she never imagined the situation was this serious. She said she thought the house sale had been a poor decision, but not something that could lead to criminal charges. She said she believed Dad when he told her everything was under control. She whispered that she had been wrong. I leaned back against the cushions, letting her words sink in. I had wanted acknowledgement for so long, and now that it was coming, it felt strange, like the foundation of our relationship had shifted too much to go back to what it was. She said softly that she could not stay with him after this. Not because of the embarrassment, not because of the arrest, but because of the lies. She said she had spent years holding their marriage together with excuses. She barely believed herself. Seeing the truth so publicly had taken something out of her. She said she was tired of protecting someone who did not protect her in return. Her voice cracked when she said she was filing for divorce. Not with fireworks or anger, just a quiet decision spoken like a long overdue truth. I did not speak for a moment. I felt sadness for her. Not because the marriage was ending, but because she had finally realized she deserved better. She asked if I hated her. I told her I did not. I told her I was hurt and exhausted, but I did not hate her. She breathed out slowly like she had been holding that question inside her chest for years. She said she wanted to understand everything. She wanted the full truth, not just the version Dad had fed her. I told her I would explain it all in time. She asked me to come home. I told her gently that I could not. Not yet. Too much had happened in that house. Too much had been taken from me there. She did not argue. She simply said she understood. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while, letting the quiet reassemble itself. It was almost peaceful. But the night was not done. Not yet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number with the location tag from the county detention center. I closed my eyes for a moment before answering. Dad's voice came through, thin and strained. He asked if I was there. I said yes. He started talking fast, the way he always did when he felt control slipping away. He said everything had been blown out of proportion. He said he had only been trying to keep the family afloat. He said he had been drowning and saw the house as the only way out. He said he never intended to hurt me. I listened, silent, letting him speak himself into circles. He said he believed I could handle anything, that I was the strong one. He said Claire would never have survived the stress he was under. He said he had been trying to keep her from falling apart. He said I did not need the house. He said I had my life already. Then his voice cracked. He said he did not want to lose his family. He said he made mistakes, but he only wanted to keep everyone together. He asked me to talk to someone, to fix this, to help him. He said he just needed one more chance. He said he could make it right. I let the silence stretch until I could hear his breathing on the other end. Then I asked him a question I had held inside for months. Why did you choose me to sacrifice? He went quiet. Not a single word moved through the line. I repeated the question slowly, each word heavy. Why me? He said something about pressure, something about timing, something about not thinking clearly. But none of it answered the question. None of it reached the truth. I told him I had spent my whole life being the one who held things together, the one who did not ask for much, the one he could rely on to stay quiet. He did not deny it, not once. I told him I was not rescuing him, not this time. I told him the legal process would continue the way it was supposed to. No shortcuts, no secrets. He begged, he pleaded, his voice broke, but I stayed steady. I told him I would only engage under one condition. Every cent from the sale of Grandma's house would be returned. Every expense is tracked. Every gift bought with that money accounted for. And he would sign a legal statement admitting the forgery. He tried to negotiate. I told him the negotiation was over. His voice turned desperate. He asked if I could live with that. I said I had been living with the consequences of his choices for years. The silence on his end changed then. It was no longer fear. It was recognition. He understood I meant what I said. He whispered something he had already broken. Then the line cut out. The automated voice said the call had ended. I let the phone fall to my lap. Barely a minute passed before another message came in, this time from Evan. He said the arrest had gone smoothly. The initial interviews had begun, and the next phase would proceed in the following days. I stared at his message, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Then another message, this one from a family friend who had never reached out to me directly before. She said Dad's girlfriend had slipped out of the party during the commotion and was refusing to answer calls. She said the investigators had already contacted her because some of the gifts, funded with the stolen money, exceeded the legal threshold and had to be returned. She said it was becoming a whole separate mess. I pictured trying to get away before anyone demanded explanations. She had played her part in his life and was now running from the wreckage. For a long moment, I stared at the ceiling, taking in everything. Mom is leaving him. His girlfriend disappeared. Dad begging for a lifeline. The car Claire loved suddenly coming with a story she had not asked for. Pieces scattered everywhere. I wondered what Grandma would have said if she could see this. Maybe she would have told me that sometimes the truth breaks things before it rebuilds anything. Maybe she would have said that protecting yourself is not cruelty. Maybe she would have said she left the house for a reason. I spent the rest of the night walking from room to room, not sure what I was looking for. My apartment felt small, but safe. What mattered was that it was mine. Something no one had taken. Something no one had used for someone else's emergencies. A little after midnight, Mom texted again. She said she was at home, alone. She said she kept staring at the place where the Christmas decorations looked too bright, too neat, too staged. She said she finally understood how thin the surface had been. She asked if she could come stay with me for a while. I typed slowly that she could, but not tonight. I needed rest. I needed to breathe. She replied with a simple, "Thank you." I set my phone down and wrapped the blanket around me again. I stared at my small tree in the corner, the white lights soft and warm. I had bought it on sale years ago, and it had never meant much before. Tonight, it felt like a sign of something better, something new. I thought about the house in Bozeman, the pine trees, Grandma's letters, the quiet strength she said I carried. And I knew then what my next step was. I was not going back to the old house. Not the physical one, not the emotional one, not the version of myself that lived inside those walls. I was done returning to places that had never protected me. I sat down on the edge of the couch and let the final decision settle over me. I was not going back home. The words settled inside me with a calm I had never felt before. I sat there on the edge of the couch, the room dim except for the soft glow of the small Christmas tree in the corner. Outside, the snow had thickened, muffling the sounds of passing cars and late-night laughter from neighboring apartments. My life felt strangely quiet, suspended, like the moment between an inhale and an exhale. I knew what was coming next. Not in detail, but in truth. The things that had been hidden were finally out in the open, and there was no returning them to the dark. The next morning began slowly. I woke to a pale winter light coming through the blinds and reached for my phone, automatically. There were new messages waiting for me, some from family, some from unknown numbers, a few from coworkers who had apparently heard something from someone who had been at the Christmas party. I ignored almost all of them, scrolling only until I found a message from Mom. She wrote that she was staying at a hotel in downtown Portland. She said she needed space to think. She said she had slept maybe 2 hours, but she felt strangely clear-headed. She told me she wanted to talk when I was ready. Not as a mother demanding an explanation, just as a person trying to understand her own life again. I sent her a short reply, telling her I would meet her later that afternoon. Around mid-morning, my phone rang again. It was Claire. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice, she asked if I was okay. I told her I was. She exhaled as if she had been holding her breath. She said the house felt empty this morning. She said the decorations looked strange in the quiet, like they belonged to a celebration someone else had planned. She told me she had not slept either. She had sat up most of the night replaying everything in her mind. She said she kept looking at the car Dad had given her. She had even gone outside and opened the door, running her hand over the steering wheel. She said she felt sick knowing where the money had come from. She said she felt guilty, confused, ashamed. She said she did not know who to be angry at. I listened, letting her speak. She said she loved Dad, but she could not defend what he had done. She said she wished he had come to her instead of taking what was mine. She said she wished she had asked more questions. I told her gently that she was not responsible for his choices. I told her she had always trusted him because she had always been taught to. None of this was her fault. She cried quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the distance between us soften. Before we hung up, she said something that stayed with me for the rest of the day. She said she now understood what it felt like to be the daughter who was always told she needed more protection, and she understood how unfair that had been to me all along. In the early afternoon, I drove to meet Mom at the hotel. The lobby was warm, decorated with white lights and evergreen garlands. I found her sitting in a small corner by the fireplace, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked tired, but lighter somehow, like a person who had carried a heavy truth for too long and had finally set it down. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. She stood quickly and hugged me, a long, quiet hug that felt different from the ones she used to give. This one felt real. When we sat down, she took a deep breath and said she wanted to understand everything from the beginning. She asked me to tell her what I had discovered, how long I had known, and why I had not come to her sooner. I explained everything, slowly, carefully. The house in Bozeman, the forged documents, the money trail, the lies Dad had told to keep everything hidden. I watched her face shift from disbelief to sorrow to acceptance. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. She did not make excuses. When I finished, she covered her mouth with her hand and closed her eyes. She said she had always suspected something was wrong, but she never imagined it could be this deep. She said she had spent years convincing herself that Dad loved us in the best way. He knew how. She said she had ignored red flags because she had wanted the family to work, even if it meant reshaping the truth to fit the picture she wanted to see. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she was sorry, truly sorry. Not for the surface-level things, but for the years she had allowed me to be the sturdy one, the self-sufficient one, the one who did not get the comfort or protection that should have been mine too. She said she did not expect forgiveness overnight. She just wanted honesty now, even if it broke more things along the way. We talked for over 2 hours. At one point, she said she had decided to divorce Dad. She said she had made the decision without his arrest as the final straw. The truth was that the marriage had ended long before last night. This was simply the moment she finally admitted it. She said she was not going back to the house. She said she could not live in a place built on lies and silence. She asked if she could stay with me for a while, but she promised she would find her own space soon. I told her she could stay. She squeezed my hand, grateful but cautious, as if she did not want to take advantage of my kindness again. She asked if I was going to see Dad. I told her I was not right now. She nodded. She did not push. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It was Dad calling from the detention center. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. He said he needed me. He said he loved me in the only way he knew how. He said he was sorry. He said he had lost everything. I did not listen to the rest of the message. I deleted it. The days that followed were quiet and strangely peaceful. My apartment became a temporary refuge for Mom. We made simple meals, watched old movies, and talked about things we had never talked about before. She apologized again, not dramatically, but with sincerity. She said she wanted to start over. I told her it would take time. She understood. Claire visited a few days later. She hugged me and cried, telling me she wished none of this had happened, but she knew the truth mattered. She told Mom she wanted a relationship that was honest from now on. Watching the two of them, I felt the pieces of something new forming quietly in the spaces where the old family had collapsed. News about Dad traveled through relatives. The charges moved forward. His girlfriend did not return. Some of the gifts she received were taken back through civil order. His reputation crumbled. His job put him on leave. his social circle dissolve. His world, built on confidence and secrecy, began collapsing from every angle. I felt no pleasure in it, only relief. The relief that comes from no longer carrying someone else's consequences. The relief of finally being able to exhale. One evening, as Mom rested in the guest room and Claire sat at my small kitchen table sipping tea, I stood by the window and watched the snow fall again. The city lights reflected off the white rooftops, and for the first time in years, I felt something like peace settle beneath my ribs. I thought back to the message that started everything, the one where Dad told me that no one needed me to come home for Christmas. It sounded so final, so dismissive. At the time, it felt like an ending. But now, standing there in the quiet glow of my apartment, I realized something important. The message had not started anything. It had simply revealed what had always been there. I had spent years trying to earn a place in a family that required pieces of me to disappear. That text was not the beginning of a downfall. It was the moment I stopped lying to myself. I turned away from the window and joined Claire at the table. She looked at me with tired eyes, but also with something new. Respect, maybe, or understanding, or both. I felt lighter than I had in a long time, and that is where my story ends for now. Not with a perfect family repaired, not with everyone holding hands under warm Christmas lights, but with something quieter, something more honest, a life rebuilt from truth instead of silence. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.